Episode 185.
All right, Harry,
He said, beaming when Harry approached the fence.
Come in. We'll have a cup of dandelion juice. How's things?
Hagrid asked him as they settled down at his wooden table with a glass apiece of ice juice.
You, feeling all right, are you?
Harry knew from the look of concern on Hagrid's face that he was not referring to Harry's physical well-being. I'm fine, Harry said quickly, because he could not bear to discuss the thing that he knew was in Hagrid's mind. So where you been?
Been hiding out in the mountains, said Hagrid, up in a cave, like Sirius did when he...
Hagrid broke off, cleared his throat gruffly, looked at Harry, and took a long draught of juice.
Anyway, back now, he said feebly.
You look better, said Harry, who was determined to keep the conversation moving away from Sirius.
What?
Said Hagrid, raising a massive hand and feeling his face.
Oh yeah. Well, Grumpy's loads better behave now. Loads. Seemed right pleased to see me when I got back, to tell you the truth. He's a good lad, really. I've been thinking about trying to find him a lady friend, actually.
Harry would normally have tried to persuade Hagrid out of this idea at once. The prospect of a second giant taking up residence in the forest, possibly even wilder and more brutal than Grop, was positively alarming. But somehow Harry could not muster the energy necessary to argue the point. He was starting to wish he was alone again, and with the idea of hastening his departure took several large gulps of his dandelion juice, half emptying his glass.
Everyone knows you've been telling the truth now, Harry, said Hagrid, softly and unexpectedly. It's got to be better, hadn't it?
Harry shrugged.
Look,
Hagrid leaned toward him across the table.
I knew Sirius longer than you did. He died in battle, and that's the way he'd have wanted to go.
He didn't want to go at all, said Harry angrily. Hagrid bowed his great shaggy head.
Nah, I don't reckon he did, he said quietly. But still, Harry, he was never one to sit around at home and let other people do the fighting. He couldn't have lived with himself if he hadn't gone to hell.
Harry leapt up again. I've got to go and visit Ron and Hermione in the hospital wing, he said mechanically.
Oh,
said Hagrid, looking rather upset.
Oh, all right then, Harry. Take care of yourself then, and drop back in if you got 'em all.
Yeah, right. Harry crossed to the door as fast as he could and pulled it open. He was out in the sunshine again before Hagrid had finished saying goodbye and walked away across the lawn. Once again, people called out to him as he passed. He closed his eyes for a few moments, wishing they would all vanish, that he could open his eyes and find himself alone in the grounds. A few days ago, before his exams had finished and he had seen the vision Voldemort had planted in his mind, he would have given almost anything for the wizarding world to know that he had been telling the truth, for them to believe that Voldemort was back and know that he was neither a liar nor mad. Now, however, he walked a short way across the lake, sat down on its bank, sheltered from the gaze of passers-by behind a tangle of shrubs, and stared out over the gleaming water, thinking. Perhaps the reason he wanted to be alone was because he had felt isolated from everybody since his talk with Dumbledore. An invisible barrier separated him from the rest of the world. He had always been, a marked man. It was just that he had never really understood what that meant. And yet, sitting here on the edge of the lake, with the terrible weight of grief dragging at him, with the loss of Sirius so raw and fresh inside, he could not muster any great sense of fear. It was sunny, and the grounds around him were full of laughing people, And even though he felt as distant from them as though he belonged to a different race, it was still very hard to believe as he sat here that his life must include or end in murder. He sat there for a long time, gazing out at the water, trying not to think about his godfather or to remember that it was directly across from here on the opposite bank that Sirius had collapsed, trying to fend off 100 Dementors. The sun had fallen before he realized that he was cold. He got up and returned to the castle, wiping his face on his sleeve as he went. Ron and Hermione left the hospital wing completely cured 3 days before the end of term. Hermione showed signs of wanting to talk about Sirius, but Ron tended to make hushing noises every time she mentioned his name. Harry was not sure whether or not he wanted to talk about his godfather yet. His wishes varied with his mood. He knew one thing, though. Unhappy as he felt at the moment, he would greatly miss Hogwarts in a few days' time when he was back at number 4 Privet Drive. Even though he now understood exactly why he had to return there every summer, he did not feel any better about it. Indeed, he had never dreaded his return more. Professor Umbridge left Hogwarts the day before the end of term. It seemed that she had crept out of the hospital wing during dinner time, evidently hoping to depart undetected. But unfortunately for her, she met Peeves on the way, who seized his last chance to do as Fred had instructed and chased her gleefully from the premises, whacking her alternately with a walking stick and a sock full of chalk. Many students ran out into the entrance hall to watch her running away down the path, and the heads of houses tried only half-heartedly to restrain their pupils. Indeed, Professor McGonagall sank back into her chair at the staff table after a few feeble remonstrances and was clearly heard to express a regret that she could not run cheering after Umbridge herself, because Peeves had borrowed her walking stick. The last evening at school arrived. Most people had finished packing and were already heading down to the end-of-term feast, but Harry had not even started.
"Just do it tomorrow," said Ron, who was waiting by the door of their dormitory. "Come on, I'm starving."
"I won't be long. Look, you go ahead." But when the dormitory door closed behind Ron, Harry made no effort to speed up his packing. The very last thing he wanted to do was to attend the end-of-term feast. He was worried that Dumbledore would make some reference to him in his speech. He was sure to mention Voldemort's return. He had talked to them about it last year, after all. Harry pulled some crumpled robes out of the very bottom of his trunk to make way for folded ones, and as he did so, noticed a badly wrapped package lying in a corner of it. He could not think what it was doing there. He bent down, pulled it out from underneath his trainers, and examined it. He realized what it was within seconds. Sirius had given it to him just inside the front door of 12 Grimmauld Place. "Use it if you need me, all right?" Harry sank down onto his bed and unwrapped the package. Out fell a small, square mirror. It looked old. It was certainly dirty. Harry held it up to his face and saw his own reflection looking back at him. He turned the mirror over. There was, on the reverse side, a scribbled note from Sirius. "This is a two-way mirror. I've got the other. If you need to speak to me, just say my name into it. You'll appear in my mirror, and I'll be able to talk in yours. James and I used to use them when we were in separate detentions." And Harry's heart began to race. He remembered seeing his dead parents in the mirror of Erised 4 years ago. He was going to be able to talk to Sirius again, right now. He knew it. He looked around to make sure there was nobody else there. The dormitory was quite empty. He looked back at the mirror, raised it in front of his face with trembling hands, and said loudly and clearly, "Sirius,